Shalom, shalom, Mr. Picard. Welcome again to another class that we're going to be doing here this late morning. All right, my brother and sisters, my name is Kasada Bar, and we're going to begin with the Father's Prayer, and we're going to do it in Ibrit, and then we'll do it in English. All right. Abinu, Shabbat Shamayim, Yit Kudash Shemka, O Yit Barak Melkutka, Retsumka Yahiyeh Ishui, Ba Shamayim, U Ba Aretz, Ut At Ain, Lakminu Tamadit, Umakulanu, Kataatenu, Ka Asher Anaknu, Mukhalin, U Al Tabi Ainu Layide Nasayon, U Sham Ranu Makal Ra, Hallelujah. As some say, Amen. Our Father which art in heaven, set apart be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Father, we pray that you give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, Father, but deliver us from all that is evil. For thine is the kingdom, and all esteem belongs to the Father through his Son, YAHUSHA Ha'Mashiach. Once again, Mr. Picard, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedule this morning to join the congregation of Yashra'al in another lesson that we could be doing here this late morning. Once again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. And I want to go in a little bit more in depth with the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter. There are so many small, I'm going to say nuances that are overlooked. And I believe that the more we're in tune with Daniel's revelation, it'll give us a better understanding on how to read the rest of what some are calling end-time prophecies, what happened in 70 AD, and was there anything showed to Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, as far as events that goes past 70 AD. There are some that are saying that everything came to a conclusion in 70 AD, but I believe that the framework that we have here in Daniel, the 7th chapter, might prove otherwise. Some of the arguments that I have is that some brothers and sisters are not recognizing the different writing styles. Like take, for example, beginning like in the later chapters of Daniel, the 7th chapter, we have scriptures being written in Aramaic versus Hebrew in Daniel, the 4th chapter, like I have been sharing so often that's actually written in Chaldean. So making sure that we understand the languages, Mr. Bakar, is going to be extremely important. And at the end of the day, my argument is that the race is not to the swiftest. All right, it's definitely not to the swiftest. But when we have to get there. All right, so this is not a competition. We all have to get there, and everybody grows at their own pace here. So let's not make this whole thing competitive. We're going to all get it right. All right, so once again, we're going to all get it right. But let's go ahead without further ado. And let's go ahead, Mishpachar, with today's lesson. And it's entitled, Exploring the Framework of Daniel Chapter 7. Okay, once again, the title of today's show is entitled, Exploring the Framework of Daniel Chapter 7. Okay. Now, what I find is going to be very interesting, Mishpachar, is that we have to have a foundation. Without a foundation, no doctrine can stand the test of the time. It can't have a beginning without a foundation. So a foundation is going to be very important. So what I like to try to do here this morning, Mishpachar, is I want to build a strong foundation in Daniel, the 7th chapter. I'm finding Daniel, the 2nd chapter, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12 also are extremely important. And if we can't get those chapters under lock and key, it's going to be very difficult for us to understand or overstand the book of Ezekiel and the book of Revelation. So building a strong foundation in Daniel, the 7th chapter, is going to be very important. Now, Mishpachar, this is what I've concluded, all right, with my investigation, and I'm going to continue to add slideshows to my presentations. And the reason why is because there's so much information that's out here, and once again, a strong foundation is going to be key. So let me share with you, Mishpachar, where I'm coming from in regards to Daniel, the 7th chapter. In Daniel, the second chapter, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a giant, metallic man. He cannot remember the dream and therefore calls upon his wise men to tell him the dream and the interpretation. Guess what? They simply can't. Their conclusion, which are now the Magi's, their conclusion is that only the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh, can interpret such mysteries. Because once again, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream and he has a hard time remembering the dream, and he wants the interpretation of the dream, but he's putting his Magi's into a awkward situation where he's not going to tell them the dream, and yet he still wants the interpretation of the dream. So let's move on. Their conclusion is that only the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh, can interpret such mysteries. The interpretation shows that Babylon pictured their gods as distant and uncaring. Because the wise men cannot give the king an answer, Nebuchadnezzar determines to kill all these false wise men. Watch what happens. Daniel intercedes, and he asks for some time to pray. After he and his friends pray, the sovereign Yah reveals the mystery to Daniel in a night vision. And so what I find it interesting here now is that in the midst of this particular, because I'm going to take this thing real slow, in this particular captivity, there's a prophet. This prophet, the main one is Daniel, and we also have the three boys, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. We also have those guys there too. But the main one that we're going to be dealing with in the book of Daniel, the second chapter, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, is going to be Daniel. All right, Daniel's going to be the most important character in this story here. Now, we learn about this king's dream of the image, the stone and a mountain. Very important. The stone and a mountain. Daniel tells the king about his dream. He tells of a great metal man image made of gold, 1, silver, 2, bronze, 3, and iron. Now watch this now. It also talks about a mix of iron and clay. All right? A mixture of iron and clay. In the dream, a stone struck and destroyed the image. So important. In the dream, a stone struck and destroyed the image, which then grew into a mountain, then filled the whole earth. The dream and its interpretation represents successive world kingdoms, followed by the second return of the Mashiach and God's or the Father's eternal kingdom. The specifics include this way. I like slideshows, okay, because slideshows gives an explanation, it shows a picture while me, the orator, tells the story. So that way, nobody is saying that, you know what, your brother Kasada Ba is actually making things up. So let's read on. I want to talk about the feature and the material, the kingdom and the period. Now, the head of gold, which is Babylon, Babylon ran from 605 to 539 BC. So what I'm trying to share here, Mishpachah, is that building a strong foundation in Daniel is going to be extremely important. So anybody that's going to now break down the book of Daniel, they must have a foundation. And if you have a foundation, you have a presentation, that way the individual or individuals can actually follow along with you, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. And as you're doing, again, the orating in your presentation, you're able to now show pictures describing what you're saying to help the audience now get a clearer picture of what you're talking about. So the head of gold is Babylon, and Babylon ran from the period of 605 to 539 BC. The chest and arms of silver, which are the Medo-Persian Empire, they ran from 539 to 331 BC. The belly and thighs of bronze and brass, which are the Greece, They ran from 331 to 168 BC. The legs of iron, which is Rome, which ran from 168 BC to 476 AD. That timeline that we have with Rome is very important because we have something happening to Rome. Rome wasn't conquered by a military. They were not conquered by a military. Now, they had a lot of skirmishes inside of their empire, but another kingdom did not rise up and destroy Rome. That didn't happen. Watch what happens, though. We have now the feet of mixed iron and clay represents Europe, and that period ran from 476 AD into present time. So Rome went through a transition, and there was fighting amongst the elites in Rome. But a literal military coming and destroying Rome, that never happened. Rome went through a transition. A transition now, so the feet of mixed iron and clay now becomes Europe, and which have now from 476 AD to present. Now watch now how this timeline of succession comes about. After this, the stone strikes and destroys the image. That kingdom is the Mashiach's kingdom. The period is the Mashiach's second coming. The stone becomes a mountain. That is God's kingdom, and that kingdom now runs forevermore. So this timeline, Mishpachah, is not only important, it is detrimental to one's understanding what is going on in Daniel, the 7th chapter. Once again, without a strong foundation, Mishpachah, we might be sharing stories or our interpretation of the Bible, and it is not based upon the information that was left to us from Daniel to help us to understand how to read the book of Revelation. All right, so let's move on. Daniel, the 2nd chapter. This is Yah's timeline of history. This is the metal statue that I have on the left-hand side, the stone of the great mountain. Daniel, the 2nd chapter, verse 31 says, "A single one, which is the great statue, was large and of extraordinary splendor, and its appearance was awesome." Daniel 2:34 says, "A stone was cut out without hands and struck the statue on its feet." Location is very important because if we look at now what is happening at the feet era, let's go back again. Let's go back. I'm going to wait till the slideshow catches up. It makes mention that when the stone strikes the feet, that stone that strikes the feet and destroys the image is the Mashiach's kingdom. The Mashiach's kingdom. And that period now is the Mashiach's second coming. That stone becomes a mountain, which is God's kingdom. And that period now, it runs forevermore. That should be real easy to understand. I even have an illustration here. On the far right-hand side, we have a stone, and this stone now strikes the image at the feet. And let's now read the book of Daniel, the 2nd chapter, verse 35. Daniel 2:35 reads this way. The metals, were crushed all at the same time and became like chaff. The wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. So we have to ask ourselves today, Mishpachah, when we begin to look at this successorship in kingdoms, where we have the Babylonians, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greeks, and the Romans. And then it talks about the 10 toes, the iron mixed with clay. And we're going to talk about these this same object, one time is being described as metals, and then the other time they're being described as beasts. Very important. They're being described as beasts. But what I find interesting now is that it says that the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. The dream was a mystery to the king. Daniel was the only one who could tell the king what he actually dreamed and who could interpret it, who can interpret what it meant. Hey, shalom, shalom, Mikael, my brother, shalom, shalom. I'm glad you were able to join me here. This morning, we're going over Daniel, the seventh chapter, and we're trying to get a timeline here on exactly what is going on today in these latter days, which I believe to be latter days. And I believe that the only way that we can clearly get a great understanding of what's going on is that we have a clear understanding of what's going on in the book of Daniel, the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th chapter, with the understanding that 7 through, I believe it's 9, or 7 through 9, we actually have the writings in Aramaic. I believe it's also in 10 too, but I have to double check it. But these are the nuances I believe that a lot of people are overlooking, and there is a slight difference in vocabulary when we begin to look at Hebrew versus Aramaic, and we know that Daniel spoke Chaldean, he spoke Hebrew, and he also spoke Aramaic. Let's move on. Daniel builds a strong foundation for Daniel, the 7th chapter. Daniel's the second framework review. This is just a review. We need to review Daniel, the 2nd chapter, because we're going to build from it and discover greater detail in Daniel, the 7th chapter. So let's briefly remind ourselves of what we've learned, because I've gone through this many times before, but I'm adding slideshows to try to help the audience see a clearer picture every single time that the Father brings information to me through prayer and concentrating. I'm always getting information, and so I want to share this information with you guys here so you can see where I'm going. I have these slideshows, and anybody that is interested in these slideshows, I would give them to you free of cost. And for some people, free is still too expensive. But I'm telling you that I'm giving it to you for free. So that way, if you're not catching everything that I'm saying with the side of my presentations, I'll simply just email it to you. So watch this, Mishpachah. Yah gave King Nebuchadnezzar a dream of a metal man statue, a stone in a great mountain. The metal man statue was large and extraordinary splendor. It had a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and the feet of iron and clay. Then a stone struck the statue directly on the feet of iron and clay and crushed them. The iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all crushed at the same time and became like chaff. The wind carried them away, and not a trace of them was found. Then the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the earth. When this mountain strikes, this stone strikes the mountain, this colossal figure, it becomes a government on the earth. Very important. This stone becomes a great mountain and it fills the earth. This mountain is a government, and this government now is a righteous government, and this is the government of the Mashiach, because the Father and the Mashiach are one. So righteousness now is going to reign on the whole entire earth, and that has not happened yet. So what I'm arguing is that there's still more to the story versus now the way that preterists say that the world came to an end in 70 AD. And I do understand what they're saying. But to say now is that there won't be a righteous kingdom set up on the planet Earth, I 100% disagree with that. Okay, that is not true. That is not a Bible doctrine. Let's read on. Matthew 24, 15 and 21. Let's read that. It says now, when the Mashiach is actually speaking with his disciples during the first century, he says, therefore, When you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, so we have to understand now, what is this abomination of desolation? Some are arguing that this is actually Antiochus Epiphanes, which I totally disagree with. 110% I disagree with that. When we begin to talk about this little horn, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just to stay focused here now, okay, because we're going to take this thing very slow so that there's no hiccups with anything that I'm saying. And I want you now to be thoroughly advised on what I'm doing. And once again, if there's any questions regarding anything that I'm doing, please send me an email and I will send you the presentation for free. But watch this now. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, and then it has in parentheses, but it's still important, let the reader understand. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. This is first century events, all right? Jerusalem is about to be destroyed. The Father has had enough with the adulterous woman, and that adulterous woman is the nation of Israel. Let's try to keep a timeline here going on. The Mashiach is talking to his disciples during the first century. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things out of their house or that are in their house, because this thing is going to happen fast and quick. Fast and quick. And so this is the reason why, if anybody was to ask, why do it seem like the disciples was preaching in haste? They were preaching in haste because there was a time frame. We have to understand this time frame model that was also set up with Daniel when we begin to understand the 70 weeks. So the 7, the 62, and that last week is going to be very important. And if we can't understand that and put it in some type of chronological order, we're going to miss the boat, Mr. Car. We're going to miss it. So this is an event that was fast approaching during the first century AD. And that event that was going to happen now was the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Once again, the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Whoever is in the fields must not turn back to get his cloak, but woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. Verse 20, but pray that your flight would not be in the winter or on a Shabbat, for there will be a great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world, unto now, nor ever will. So verse 21, Mishpachah, is very important, so let me just read it to you one more time. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world. In this world now is talking about Israel. Okay, from the time of Israel becoming a nation until now, nor ever will. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail a little bit later on. And there's enough information in verse 21 that challenges now the 70 AD doctrine, but we'll do that at another time. In this passage, Yahushua warns the people of his day that the destruction of Jerusalem was imminent, and he commands them to read and understand the book of Daniel. But Yahushua's warning in Matthew the 24th chapter is also applicable for the end of time. Let me read this again. But Yahushua's warning in Matthew the 24th chapter is also applicable for the time or the end of time. It is a prophecy which forecasts the end of the world and the second coming. Once again, it is a prophecy which forecasts the end of the world and the second coming. So when we talk about the end of the world, we're talking about the end of Jerusalem being a fortified, replicable city of worship. That world came to an end in 70 AD. And I'm going to use that real loosely, okay? Temple services stopped in 70 AD. And there has not been temple services now for a little over 2,000 years. So this is what we're talking about when it talks about now the end of the world and the second coming. And there was put it this way, there was a coming of the Mashiach in 70 AD. There was a coming, but second coming, third comings, and fourth comings, we're going to leave that alone for right now. And Yahusha said that to understand the end times, we had better understand the book of Daniel. The book reveals with uncanny accuracy for 2,500 years of human history since the time of ancient Babylon. Once again, the book reveals with uncanny accuracy the 2,500 years of human history since the time of ancient Babylon. And it shines. I mean, it's the ancient Babylon. We're talking about during the time, not of Nebuchadnezzar. We're talking about now during the time with Nimrod. Okay, so there was Babylon Nimrod, there was Babylon Nebuchadnezzar, and that word Babylon we see being a word that is interchangeable, describing anyone, nation, people, or kings, if they're not following divine order, being, if we were to look at the definition of the word Babel, which means confusion, anything that is outside of Torah is considered Babel or Babylon. But keeping everything once again in its proper perspective now was that all four beasts were considered Babylon. Literal Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Greeks and the Romans, and even the iron mix of clay, that was all considered Babylon, one statue, and the stone struck the statue at his feet and destroyed that whole Babylonian system. Because these are successor states or kingdoms that's going from the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and the iron mixed with clay. So let's just read on. The book reveals with uncanny accuracy for 2,500 years of human history since the time of ancient Babylon. And it shines the prophetic searchlight of Bible prophecy upon our day. Confucius said, a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is the reason why I like doing slideshow presentations, because a person can now actually look at pictures. You have the scriptures that I'm using. And once again, if there's any questions regarding anything that I'm saying, symbolism. He paints the scenes of human history with pictures. Let's see the elements together in order of their progression. This is vitally important because the same pattern will emerge in Daniel, the 7th chapter. So I have a graph here at the bottom. Daniel, again, the 2nd chapter explains the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and Europe. Now it talks about successive world kingdoms. And if you go down to my left now, you have after Babylon, Medo-Persian, the Greeks, Romans, and Europe, it talks about a stone. This stone becomes a mountain. So when we look at successive world kingdoms, we have the stone, which represents Yahushua HaMashiach. We have the mountain that represents God's eternal kingdom. The pattern is this. Number 1, successive world kingdoms. Number 2, Yahushua HaMashiach is the stone. Number 3, God's eternal kingdom is what we're looking for, because God's eternal kingdom is both spiritual and literal, where there will actually now be a physical kingdom on the planet Earth representing righteousness the same way that there's righteousness in Shamayim. Understanding Daniel's prophetic timeline, solving the puzzle. The pattern is this, as I shared earlier. 1, successive world kingdoms. 2, Yahusha's kingdom. 3, Yahuwah's eternal kingdom. So this, once again, Mishmachah, it explains the function of the stone becoming a mountain, and the mountain now filling the whole earth. Once again, the stone becomes a mountain, and the mountain fills the whole earth. This pattern will be repeated in Daniel 7 and with more details. That is, as we read Daniel, the 7th chapter, we're going to see this pattern emerge. A pattern of successive world kingdoms followed by Yahushas, followed by Yah's eternal kingdom. In Daniel, the 7th chapter, Yah will repeat the sequence of events, but he will do so in a slightly different way and will add more details. This is Yah's way of teaching us and leading us to greater truth. It is important so that we can deepen our understanding of Yah's plan for all mankind. So, Mishpachah, my slideshows from this point going forward, they're not going to be extremely long because I want everybody to truly digest what I'm saying. All right, please pay very close attention. We're talking about successive world kingdoms. And what this stone is actually going to do is going to strike this colossal figure at a specific location. And that location is the feet. And when it strikes this colossal figure at the feet, it's making mention now is that governmental system that ran from the Babylonians and it transitioned that system, that ideology, that mindset transferred over to the Medo-Persian Empire. It transferred over to the Greeks. It transferred over to the Romans, and eventually now to the 10 toes, which I'm saying now is Europe. It is Europe. The stone hits the feet, crashes the whole colossal figure, and is being compared to now the summer shaft, and it is blown away, and there's no more memory, no more remnants of any of that colossal figure, and now righteousness is reigning on the planet Earth. So I'm going to hold off a little while. I'm going to look at the live chat and see whether or not there's any questions. And if there are no questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this 7-slide presentation. I want to thank you for your time and joining me here this morning, Mishpachah, and we're going to do it again, the Father's will, next week. I also want to share too now is that if ever you don't see activity on YouTube, I am doing Zoom calls. All right, so I'm always busy in the Father's work, and I do send invites out to those that are interested now in going into like a lot more deeper detail with the book of Daniel, with the book of Revelation. But again, I'm doing this through like Zoom call, and eventually I'll put them out on YouTube. But if anybody, once again, is interested in Zoom call conversation, that email is nustudy, study, new, new, age, age, at AOL.com. And we go a lot deeper into these particular type of topics. But you can also find through Facebook my times when I'm sharing more information through Zoom. So once we begin, Mishpachah, I'm going to thank you for your time and joining me here this morning. And to be the Father's will, we'll do it again next week. And if anybody feels moved by the Ruach HaKodesh, you can also send your donations and free will offerings to $KASADAHBA. And the funds are used to help build up the congregation. We have something setting up in Roswell, Georgia, real soon here. So any contribution that you would like to help the congregation of Yashra'al move forward in the ministry, you can please send your donations there. And once again, Mr. Kass, I want to say shalom, shalom. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll talk to you again real soon next Shabbat. Shalom, shalom.